thought it was about time for a change of scene, so we've come to College Station, Texas, the Museum of the American GI, and we're going to go over their M24 light tank. By March 1943, the Army had decided that its light tanks needed to have a little bit more firepower than the 37mm found then on the M3 and M5. They decided to go with a 75. They also decided that they were quite happy with the powertrain of the M5 and wanted to keep it, although the tank had to be a little bit bigger and a little bit wider as well, not least to mount the larger cannon. What they ended up with was the M24 light tank, known as a Chaffee or Chaffee, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Adnan is, of course, not around to tell us how he pronounced it, and I have met persons of the same spelling who have pronounced it both ways. M24 entered full-scale production April 1944. 4,731 units were built in 2 facilities. The description in the manual is simple enough. It states, and I quote, "The light tank M24 is an armoured, full-track laying combat vehicle mounting a 75mm gun. It consists of a crew of 4 men, the commander, a gunner, the driver, and an assistant driver. And no, I am not misquoting. The hull is fully welded, generally made of 1-inch plates. Split into 2 compartments, crew compartment in the front, and an engine compartment in the back, which is separated by a stepped bulkhead. All sides, as you can see, are not vertical like in most tanks, they're angled inwards at 12 degrees. An inspection of the whole front reveals no massive surprises. There is a bow 30 cal on the right hand side. The front hull, of course, is dominated by the access panel for the differential. Final drives are located in the typical bulges on the inside of the sprocket wheels. Front left of the vehicle, simple enough. Service drive, blackout marker, siren. Manufactured, it says, by the Federal Electric Company of Chicago, Illinois. And for road marches, the driver has a windshield, collapsible forward, of course, locked down into position, and for road marches can come up. You'll see it does have a windshield wiper and a heating filament for defrosting purposes. One of the great mysteries of life that has been pointed out to me is that nobody seems to be entirely sure what these are for. They weren't, I'm told, on the original vehicles. Later production vehicles had them added. And there are also some at the back, so the idea of it maybe being a bulldozer mounting doesn't seem to be applicable. Who knows, maybe by the time I have this video edited, I'll find out the answer. As you move further back towards the rear of the vehicle, got tow cable, first aid box, a pull handle here. This is the external handle for the engine compartment fire extinguisher. It can also be set off from inside the tank. You'll see the sand shields have been removed. They tended not to last very long in combat anyway. They're a bit of a nuisance, so the museum has taken them off this particular vehicle. Track blocks. The track blocks that you'll see at the back here are in a different position than you'll see on a lot of M24s out and about today. There was a post-war modification that the track links were moved to the front of the tank. One of the more significant differences between the M5 and the M24 in terms of the running gear is that the M5's bogie system has been replaced by an individually sprung torsion bar system, 5 pairs of wheels per side. Now, the thing about torsion bars is because you have to leave room for one bar to be in front of the other, the wheels are not actually even. If you look straight sideways under a torsion bar vehicle, you see that one set of wheels is further forward than the other. Shock absorbers will be found on the first, second, last and second from last road wheel arms. The center road wheel doesn't have a shock absorber. All the arms will, however, have a bump stop, and this prevents the arm from going up too far and snapping your torsion bar. Now, one of the downsides of a torsion bar system is that repairing it is not an easy task. If a torsion bar breaks, what you have to do is pull off one of the road wheels, disconnect the torsion bar anchor, pull out the part of the torsion bar that hasn't actually broken. Then what you have to do is reach inside, and somewhere inside the tank are going to be the remnants of the other part of the torsion bar that snapped. Fragments here or there. And, if they're inside a guide tube, that makes it worse, because if you can't unbolt the guide tube, then you have great difficulty reaching the fragments that you have to pull out. It's almost as if you wish you could turn the tank on its side and shake it and the pieces would fall out. You have to get every last fragment out before you can put the new torsion bar in. And it's enough of a hassle that when we had an Abrams, one of my wing tanks had a number 7 left torsion bar snap. We just drove around with it in that condition for 2 weeks before we bothered to change the torsion bar. It was just too much hassle to change. Bogie system, unbolt the bogie, replace, put new bogie back in. easy done. Now, one of the problems if you have a broken torsion bar and you drive around it for too long, however, is that the weight of the vehicle is now concentrated on fewer torsion bars, which means that the longer you wait, the more likely that you're standing in a motor pool and you hear this almighty clang as another torsion bar breaks, and again, it's a cumulative effect. You got 2 torsion bars broken, you don't replace them pretty quickly, you're gonna have 3 and then 4 and then 5, and then you just have a complete mess. So, difficult to change, but when you get a chance, you do need to change torsion bars. Now, the running gear is going to be similar to the M37 howitzer we saw before, which is logical enough since the M37 was basically based off of the M24. 2 types of track available. The steel single pin T72, these particular track links are the T85 double pin rubber. Either way, there are going to be 75 track links per side. End connectors will be found on either side of the double pin track, but the center guides, unlike let's say Abrams tanks today, do not form part of the connector system. Interestingly, the steel tracks are 16 inches wide, but the rubber tracks 16.5 inches. The entire track system itself will span an 8-foot trench, climb a 3-foot wall, or ford 3 foot 4 inches of water. At the front end, the sprocket is simple enough. It is reversible. You just undo the bolts here, pull off the sprocket, flip it around, put it back on, and you will then get the same amount of wear life off the other side of the tooth as you did the first side. Checking track tension is simplicity itself, at least according to the manual. All you have to do is bring the vehicle to a stop, lift up your sand shield if they happen to still have one after all you're running around, and then between the second and third return rollers you take a 4-foot pry bar, aka a tanker bar. Just happen to have one here. Insert it above, right in the middle between the 2 return rollers, and exert downwards 200 pounds of pressure according to the manual. Now, exactly how you know you've got 200 pounds of pressure, I'm not entirely sure. The manual doesn't bother to tell you how you figure this out. Once you have your 200 pounds of downward pressure, you then measure, by use of a straight edge, the manual suggests a block of wood resting on top of the track, how much of a sag you have got between the 2 return rollers. In the case of steel track, you want it somewhere over 2 inches. In the case of this rubber track, you want it to be 3¼ inches. Adjusting track tension, you've seen before on the M37, identical. Undo the locking bolt, slide up the bolt stop. You then take a wrench, 41W1315, that's what it says in the manual, and adjust the track tension by screwing forwards or backwards. It'll move the idler wheel forwards or backwards. When you're done, slide the bolt stop back down, tighten the locking bolt, away you go. Also, common to the other vehicles of the era, including the M37 of course, you'll see that there's an arm connecting the idler wheel to the last road wheel arm, so as the road wheel goes up or down, the idler wheel will move forward or backwards, maintaining track tension. While I'm here, I'll just point out the other plate at the back of the vehicle here, similar to the ones at the front. Nobody's entirely sure that can tell me what it was for. As you move up from the comp idler, having a look at the right rear of the vehicle, taillights, you'll notice the taillights are different on each side. The one on the right rear has the blackout marker and the blackout stoplight. Above it, we have a vent for the fuel tank. Exhaust pipe can be located right here. Finally, as you go to the left rear stoplight, this has the blackout stop and a service stoplight and taillight. So if you have to replace a road wheel, 2 ways of doing it. The easiest is to use a lifting ramp. It's a simple wedge-shaped piece of triangular metal. You place it between the 2 sets of road wheels, drive forwards or backwards so that the road wheel you want to change is now lifted up. You hook the road wheel arm in place by use of a spring arm retaining hook, and then you drive forwards or backwards. The ramp will lower a little bit, and you can then change out your road wheel. Your next best bet is a hydraulic jack. Easy enough, you get a piece of wood to brace it, you put the top end of the lifting jack against the road wheel arm itself, and pump up. It takes 9,000 pounds of force to lift a road wheel arm, so you want to be very sure that it's secure and it's not about to slide forwards or backwards, or you're going to have a very bad day. M24's maximum allowable speed was 34 miles an hour, with a maximum cruising speed listed in the manual of 25. Fuel consumption was rated at 0.875 miles to the gallon, giving us a grand cruising range of 100 miles. So I'm going to climb up, open her up, and let's have a look and see what makes it go. So opening up the engine compartment, we can now see what makes the M24 move. There are 2 Cadillac V8s, model 44T24, each of which is 346 cubic inches and cranks out 110 horsepower at 2,400 RPM. Now, a bit of an oddity, and this also happens with the M37, is that the front of the engine is the designated part which has a generator. The generator is right at the very back of the tank, which means this is the front of the engine, that's the back of the engine. Left and right sides of the engine refer to where it is compared to the front. So the left side of the left engine is to the right of the right engine, if that makes any sense to you. When you see one engine, you've seen them both. The engines are absolutely identical. Carburetor, engine oil, it's both the filler and the dipstick, or gauge if you want to call it that. Looking for the mark, here you go. So you can see it's a hell of a lot of stick and not very much engine. Capacity, 8 quarts. Fuel lines, again they'll connect both tanks to both engines so you can run one or both engines off of one or both fuel tanks. Carburetor, oil filter is way down at the front here, next to the generators. And down behind the engine, or in front of them, depending on your perspective, you can also make out 2 very large cooling fans. Forced air induction will draw the air from the outside over the engines and then out the vents at the back. Forward of the fuel tanks and above them, in fact mounted on basically a cutout of the fuel tank directly onto it with no separation or partition whatsoever, you're going to find the batteries. 2 batteries on each side, each of which 6 volts, gives us in series 24 volt electrical system. The batteries are mounted under the access plates, which are bolted down, so they're not an easy job or a convenient job at any rate to access for checking the fluids or whatever else you may happen to do with the batteries. Well, we can't see the transmissions because they're way down low. Cooling systems, there are 2 absolutely identical and independent cooling systems. The fans, for which you already seen, each cooling system will take 40 quarts. They are filled through the ports in the top here. And thus ends our tour of the suspension, powertrain and hull. Next time we're going to go inside. See you then.